Hello and welcome to our next Why Do Catholics question. Today we have a great one from James who asks, why do we believe in purgatory if it's not in the Bible? Thanks James, this is a great question. I hope I can give a very helpful answer for you as a result. What might surprise you is actually there is quite a lot of scripture that supports the idea of purgatory. The confusion comes about because just like with the Trinity or the Incarnation, the name purgatory never appears in the Bible by itself, and so often it can get overlooked. That said, just like these other very important Christian beliefs, there is a lot of scripture that does support it, and we're going to look at these individually so we get a good idea as to how. As a quick aside, when we talk about purgatory, what we're talking about here is the idea of after-death purification. The first evidence we have for this comes from the Book of Wisdom. It's the weakest of the evidence we can give because it might refer to pre-death purification, but within its context of talking about those destined for heaven but are already dead, it seems to imply the purification happens after death. The key line is chapter 3 verse 6, which talks about us being purified like gold in the fire. This refers to the ancient practice of purifying gold ore of its lesser imperfections by heating it to extreme temperatures. Under the pressure, the imperfections would leave the gold, and the artisan would know it was finished when they could see their reflection in the end product clearly. If this does refer to an after-death experience, it does support the idea of purgatory. Our greater sins must be dealt with before the process, and just like the gold, the condition of purgatory is not some vengeful punishment, but rather a necessary final development that cleanses us of those lesser imperfections that persist up to that point. As the text is ambiguous though, we have to rely on greater clarity elsewhere to understand when this purification takes place. For this reason, let us turn to the second book of Maccabees. In the story here, we see men who have died in battle, being prayed for and cleansed of their sins by God after their death. The text is very clear to state that the dead men were not in hell, because otherwise the prayers would be useless. He also affirms the idea that the prayers for the dead were beneficial, which would not be the case if the dead men were already in heaven, because at that point there is no situation better than the one that they are already in. Evidence for purgatory is also found within the New Testament. During Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he talks about the kingdom of heaven, and throughout this he uses many parables. In one of these he talks about resolving our differences so that we may not be thrown into jail until the quadrantes or pennies are paid off. Read out of context, this might just seem like a nice message about settling debts, but early Christian writers such as Tertullian show in writings like De Anima that they believed it too spoke of the afterlife, and in this case spoke about the need for many of us to receive some form of after-death purification. This seems very likely, as every parable around this is meant to be read with a view to the afterlife, so it would not make sense if this specific one was not to be also. Lastly, St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians again enforces the idea that after death many of us will need to be purified. Here he makes a distinction between those who go straight to heaven and receive their reward, and those who will suffer first but will be saved as a result. This is the definition of purgatory. You might also note it uses the same language as wisdom to depict this process of purification with the idea of fire cleansing us. Ultimately though, purgatory fits with our understanding of God's mercy. God's sacrifice on the cross saved us from the results of our sin. God's grace through the sacraments helps us to mend, remend and grow our relationship with Him here on earth. And through purgatory, we again see Him extending His grace to us to finally develop us into the best version of ourselves if we have not quite managed it during our life on earth. I hope this answers your question. If you or anyone else has further questions about purgatory or any other topics, please post them below or drop me an email. God bless and have a great day.